In this video, we are going to be looking at linkability from the perspective of leaks and sharding. Data leaks are occurring on a regular basis. They have been occurring for a long period of time. Every week, it feels like there is another data leak from some tech company that has been collecting data, or just a company in general that's been collecting data. And so if we remember the previous videos, we've been discussing linkability, what that is. And then the week after that, we discussed why SIM swaps work, or why SIM swaps work for hackers fundamentally involves linkability. Well, with data leaks, this gives hackers another tool to use, because these data leaks, of course, tie information that hackers can then use to uncover more about individuals. When people are doing things online, a lot of times they aren't thinking about what it is that they're doing online that hackers may find very valuable. So even if some of the below example data points are protected, let's say we have an individual named Bob, and he does a good job protecting these data points, linkability identification through data leaks can help hackers uncover some of these data points. We'll give a couple of examples. So let's say we're talking about Bob, the individual, and let's say there was a platform which allowed Bob to buy and sell goods. And Bob uses that a lot to buy goods, but he uses a different email, and he may even use a different name, right? Well, what this says, that when the hacker gets access to this information, if there's a leak on there, he might use like a different username is what I mean, is that what is fundamentally Bob buying, right? Well, what does Bob do from what he buys? We could probably deduce some things off the basis of that. We also know, because Bob is buying items, that more than likely he's going to be shipping it to a mailing or physical address. So we might be able to uncover Bob's house. Of course, depending on the platform, Bob may ship some items to his mailing address. He might ship some items to his physical address, right? He may do those things. Bob's children. We might be able to find out if more people live at the house. Keep in mind, Bob may practice good security. His family may not, right? We also may find Bob's schedule. This is more of a risk with social media or sites where people post information, though I can think of some platforms that have forums and question and answer that also allow you to buy and sell goods. And so again, you can uncover quite a bit about somebody from that. And then of course, Bob's friends, that's going to be more social media, like who is Bob connected with. So again, even though Bob did a very good job, let's say setting up his account where they're not tied with other things, the fact is there's all this underlying information that's linked, and that linked information, because fundamentally there's going to be connections here, a hacker is going to be able to discover. Well, the problem with sharding, and why sharding identity fails, is, and we're assuming here that there's no meta behavior or meta analysis available. For instance, like image data, as many of you know, has certain meta information in it, which is very valuable to hackers. But even if you remove all of those data, I should say, there's certain patterns of behavior. The fact, the very nature of images that you're taking pictures of, a lot of times is indicative of the kind of person that you are. Like a hacker can make assumptions based on the pictures that you're taking, right? Another thing too about hackers is the image itself may help them discover things. For instance, if you've watched the documentary 0 Days, you know that an image gave some things away for whoever was going after the Iranian nuclear facility, right? They had a picture that they shared. Why they did that on the internet, who knows? But they had a picture that they shared, and it actually ended up compromising them. So, but it's the same on the individual level. If you take certain pictures, that kind of tells some things about your behavior, what you're into, those type of things. So even if Bob uses, let's say, different email addresses, right, but he's shipping items from these sites that he's using, they're still tied to some address, right? So even his protection of sharding, his identity, unfortunately, isn't going to link. Same thing you could think about with IP address, right? They may use different accounts, but even with using different accounts, it's still tied to an IP address. So that also isn't going to work. Sharding identity, unfortunately, is very difficult to do without creating linkability. And then, of course, think about how many of these sites ask you for your cell phone. It's like, look, we don't link any other information, but we just need your cell phone. And it's like, no thanks. But the thing is that that's also one of those pieces of information that people tend to tie to. And even if you try to get like a temporary phone or whatever, a lot of times that's not a very effective strategy for the average person. So going back to the risks, why are these risks? Well, I mean, when we're tying data points, one of the risks here is linkability makes it easy to spoof, right? That's a huge risk. Like, we can determine a lot about Bob based on, for instance, what we had there. finding out what he does allows us to spoof his behavior, right? And then, of course, there's behavior risks as well. I mean, you have auditing, you have tracking, monitoring become easy. So depending on who Bob is, this may or may not be that big of a deal. But the bottom line is when it comes to these data leaks and when it comes to even sharding identity, unfortunately, linkability has data leaks really amplify the risks of linkability, but when it comes to sharding identity, a lot of times it's not actually done. Like, people aren't thinking about how their identities are linked. Even if they are, they think, oh, well, I'm using all these different accounts or whatnot. By the way, same thing with IP address. Even if the person's using the same computer, but they're using all these different email addresses or whatnot for ordering items. So it's not as simple as people like to think. Well, it's, as long as I use a different email address or a different username, it's like that's not always going to function correctly because unfortunately, as there's more data leaks, people find out that these sites were tracking more information than just what they were asking for. And that's one of the things that I always highly suggest people go look at some of these data leaks that have occurred and see just what other information these individuals were tracking, and you'll start to realize some of the dangers with these.